do I have a right to be happy? Do I have a right to all the candy in the store? See, is this okay for me to be as happy as God? I wrote a book once called Happier Than God. I want you to read it. If you haven't read that book, you got to pick it up and read it. I'm not trying to sell one more book here. Goodness, you know, we've been fortunate enough to sell several million copies of these books, so it's not necessary for me to try to get you to buy one more. But if you haven't purchased or taken a look at Happier Than God, you really want to take a look at it, because it talks about, if you are God, is it possible to be so happy, happier than you ever were before in this lifetime? Because if it's possible for you to be happier tomorrow than you were, say, yesterday, then you can actually be happier than God. That is, happier than you, who are God, were yesterday. And the reason you weren't so happy yesterday is because you simply didn't know what you know now. Your consciousness has expanded, your awareness has expanded, your understanding has expanded. And understanding and consciousness and awareness produces happiness, because we now see what's really so. We now really get it. But then the mind will ask the question that we asked in the first lesson: do I have a right to be happy? Because it seems almost too good to be true. It's just too good to be true for life to be this wonderful. For those for whom life is wonderful. And we'll be talking later in this course about the lives of people who are not experiencing wonderfulness in their day-to-day encounters. Because I don't want you to think that this course is only for those of us who seem to have a particular experience of life. What about this, you know, as my mother used to say, my mother used to say this, what about the starving children of Africa? Or what about the unfortunate people in this place or that? In other words, what about the people who are experiencing suffering as a day-to-day encounter with life? We'll talk about that before this course is over. But for now, can we limit our discussion to just where you are in your life right now? I can tell you, in your life right now, there is a question that would be very good for you to ask. Do I, meaning you, a first-person question, do I have a right to be happy? Again, we talked about this in the first lesson. And it comes up again here in lesson 2, because lesson 2 is about exploring what it would be like for you to have all those things that you saw or listed on your sheet, on your worksheet, that were missing in your life, or that you'd like to have be different from what they were or what they are right now. And in order to explore that, we have to take a look at, well, now, do I really have a right to have all these things that I want to have? Let me get rid of one idea, one thought right now that people sometimes hold around that. It's not okay for me to have all the good that life has to offer, because if I do, I'll be taking away from someone else's opportunity to have that. In other words, if I allow myself to have, let's use money as an example, it's an obvious one. Let's go to the obvious example. Is it okay for me to have all the money I want? Well, yes, and you will not be taking it away from anybody else. See, what we have to get rid of is the thought of limited supply. There's no such thing as limited supply. There is not a finite amount of money or love or any good thing. In fact, there's not a finite amount of anything at all, because there is nothing that is finite in the universe. We live in an infinite universe, and because the universe in which we live is infinite, you can have all the good you want, and you have a right to be happy. And no one else has to be unhappy because you're happy. Now, as I mentioned in the first lesson, I think we need to move through life with consciousness, with awareness. That is, if we have a deep awareness that a decision or a choice that we make, that us, how do I put this, going after something we want, would make someone else unhappy. I think it behooves us to hold our awareness of that truth, and then to talk and interact with that other person, who is, by the way, nothing more than us in disguise. That is, there's only one of us. All things are one thing. There's only one thing, and all things are a part of the one thing that is. So we need to talk to that other part of us, which is currently, how do I put it, masquerading as your spouse or your friend or your business partner or someone in the world who looks a lot different from you, but is in fact you extended. And we need to talk to that other person and say, look, I know that it feels to you that you are going to be unhappy if I get to have something now that makes me happy. Is there any way that we can work together, this part of me and that part of me, which we call you? Is there any way we can move through this current process by which I am creating my next idea of happiness, such that you do not create your next idea of unhappiness? How can we, can I use these words, play together? How can we dance this dance of life together so that we can both be happy? But as we enter into that two-way relationship at that deep of a level, I want to share with you that God made it very clear to me, that we are not required to betray ourselves in order to make sure or to create a space for the other person to be happy. That is, I cannot deny myself happiness as a means of making certain that the other person is not going to be unhappy. I can't be responsible for that other aspect of the all and the decisions and choices that they, of their free will, are making. I can only continue to love them, to embrace them, to hold them in the space of unconditional love, and then tell them that I'm going to now experience my happiness in the following way. And I will do anything to help you experience your happiness as well, other than what causes me to betray myself. That's why we talked in the lesson 1 about telling the truth about yourself to another and staying in touch with that truth. So it gets very, difficult as we look into these issues deeply. Somebody always brings up, in my audiences, somebody always brings up what I call end line examples. The person who wants something, the person who finds their happiness, may I put it that way, the person who finds their happiness in ways that would be deeply destructive and terrible for a great many people, but it makes them happy, So I have to, just for the purposes of practicality in this course, limit our exploration of these kinds of philosophical meanderings to people who are not mentally challenged. That is, we're not talking about people here when we talk about wanting what, when we have this entire discussion, really, we're not talking about this within the context of the behaviors, the responses, the reactions, the choices and the decisions of people who are mentally deranged or are mentally challenged in some way. So can we agree on that caveat? Can we agree on that boundary within which we hold the framework of our discussion? It's fair to ask, well, what about those people? But that's not part of this discussion. Perhaps before this entire course is over, we can take a look at that as well. But if we have enough time to do that. But that's not part of this discussion. Any more, by the way, that it's part of this discussion to talk about small children who are not mentally challenged or mentally deranged in any way, but are simply limited in terms of their human understanding. So what I'm saying here equally does not apply to a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old child in most cases. So let me be clear about this. As I said, it gets a little convoluted. That when I ask the question, do I have a right to be happy? Or when I pose the question, do people have a right to be happy? I am, in fact, talking about people who have all of their capacities. Fair enough for this conversation. It's also important to, in the context of this question, do I have a right to be happy? It's important to explore what we mean by happy. That is, what does it mean to be happy? And that's not an unimportant consideration in this whole conversation. Do I have a right to be happy means what? What is this thing called happiness about? God said to me that happiness is the feeling of completion. That happiness is how we feel when we feel that we have completely, or as near as completely as possible, experienced what we came here to life to experience at any given moment, which is who we really are.